Hello, my name is Ariana, and I am a widow. Now you will hear what my own children have done to my life. I woke up before the sun again. The soft gray of morning hadn't yet crept into the bedroom, but my eyes were open, staring at the ceiling like I was waiting for something. Maybe I still am. Habit, I suppose. After 40 years of rising at 5:30 a.m. to beat the morning rush and sip coffee before facing a room full of restless teenagers, my body doesn't know how to sleep in. Even though the classroom is gone, the bell still rings in my head. I used to wake like this next to Robert. He'd grunt, stretch, then throw one arm over me and whisper, "Already up, teacher?" And I'd roll into his warmth and pretend to be asleep just a minute longer. God, I miss him. He's been gone 3 years, and I still find myself reaching for him across the bed, expecting his body to be there, the sheets warm from his skin. But there's only the cold side of the mattress. It always feels colder than it should. I shuffle to the kitchen in my old slippers, the ones with the frayed heel and the faded blue bow. I've told myself I'll replace them 100 times, but somehow I never do. They're familiar, soft, safe, like Robert. The kettle hisses gently before it whistles, steam clouding the window above the sink. I pour the water into my favorite mug, white porcelain with a cracked handle that reads, "World's Best Mom." A Mother's Day gift from Drew when he was 6. He'd saved his allowance to buy it at the school gift shop. I remember how proud he looked when he handed it to me, wrapped in a wrinkled paper towel. I don't think he remembers it now, but I do. I remember everything. Outside, the roses are starting to bloom. Wild, unpruned. Robert used to care for them. He'd talk to them like they were old friends. "You've got to speak gently," he'd say. "They're proud little things." Since he's been gone, they've grown unruly, defiant, much like my thoughts these days. It's Wednesday. I don't need to check the calendar. My body knows. My bones know. And right on cue, the front door creaks open at 7:42 a.m., just like it does every Wednesday. No knock. No call. Just the rush of Lola's perfume before she's even in the room. "Mom, got a meeting." They had waffles and a banana. Lunches are in their bags. Emily has ballet shoes in the side pocket. Don't forget. "Love you." She doesn't wait for an answer. She's gone before I can even finish walking to the hallway. Tommy barrels in first, dragging his backpack like a soldier returning from war. "Where's the Wi-Fi, Grandma?" he asks, not even looking up. Not a "hello." Not a "how are you?" Emily follows behind, her curls bouncing, her tiny arms wrapping around my waist. "You smell like cookies," she says against my stomach. That makes me smile. Emily always knows just when to say something kind, even if she doesn't know what it means. "Good morning, sweetheart," I whisper, kissing the top of her head. "Grandma missed you." But what I don't say, what I never say, is how I dread Wednesdays now. Not because I don't love them. Not because they're not sweet, smart, vibrant little humans. I do love them, fiercely, but because I'm tired. And no one sees it. No one asks. Lola never asks. She assumes. She assumes I'll be here. That I'll have nothing planned. That my only task on Wednesdays, or really, on any day, is to be her unpaid childcare, her backup plan, her invisible safety net. When I tried to bring it up once, very gently, almost apologetically, she laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, Mom, don't be dramatic. You're not doing anything else. Not doing anything else." That phrase has lived in my head rent-free for months. It follows me through each hour, especially the quiet ones. I repeat it to myself when I try to nap and can't. When I look at the untouched canvas in the hallway closet. When I glance at the passport in the drawer, the one that hasn't seen a stamp in a decade. I used to have plans. Big ones. Little ones. Silly ones. But plans don't matter when your children believe your time belongs to them. I make the kids toast and some scrambled eggs because the waffles she gave them are still half frozen in the center. I don't say anything. Lola would be annoyed if I criticized. She already thinks I judge her too much. Maybe I do. Maybe I just miss being seen, heard, respected. My phone buzzes once. Drew. No voicemail. No text. He does that, calls, and expects me to be free, to answer immediately. If I don't, he sulks. Cassidy calls it sensitive. I call it manipulative. But of course, I never say that out loud. Cassidy doesn't like me much. She calls me Ari. Not Mom. Not Mrs. Blake. Just Ari. I hate it. It makes me feel like a stranger in my own family. He called last week, Drew. I can still hear his voice, casual, like he was asking to borrow my car or for a casserole recipe. Cass is pregnant, Mom, he said. Isn't that great? It was. I said all the right things. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. You'll be wonderful parents. But then came the next part. The part one thing I always knew was coming. We've been talking about the baby's future, and we'll need some help. Financially. Cass doesn't want to go back to work right away. I mean, you've got savings. It'd mean a lot if you gave it to us. For the baby. For the baby. Like I was an ATM with a warm smile and soft hands. I mean, don't be selfish, Mom, he said, when I didn't answer right away. This is your grandchild we're talking about. Selfish. That word sliced me open in a place I didn't know was still tender. Me, the woman who stayed up with him through every fever, who clipped coupons and skipped dinners so he could go on field trips, who took a second job tutoring kids after school when Robert's hours were cut, just so Drew could go to a decent college. Selfish. I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember what I said. I just remember sitting at the kitchen table in silence afterward, staring at the bank statement I had left out that morning. $47,316. It had taken me almost 15 years to save that much. Quietly, carefully, for something, anything, for me. But they don't see me anymore. Not as a person, only as a resource. The kids are playing now, drawing dragons and castles on printer paper with the last of my markers. I watch them and feel that familiar ache, the one that sits just behind my ribs, pulsing like a bruise. They think I'm lonely, that I have no life beyond them, that I need to be useful to be happy. But they're wrong. I've been quietly making plans. And yesterday, I booked the flight. It was Thursday morning, and the house was finally quiet again. The silence after Wednesdays always felt louder than it should. A hush that echoed in the corners of every room, reminding me just how small my world had become. The kids had left their usual trail, crumbs, crayons, half a peanut butter sandwich on the coffee table. I didn't bother cleaning it just yet. I needed a moment. I stood in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a second cup of tea, when I heard the car door slam outside. Unfamiliar. Not Lola's. Not the mailman. I peered through the curtains and felt my stomach twist. Drew. And Cassidy wasn't with him. He strode up the walkway like he owned the place, not even bothering to knock when he reached the door. Just opened it like it was still his childhood home, like he was still 10 years old, coming in for lemonade after soccer practice. Ari, he said, breathless, urgent. Good morning to you, too, I replied, holding my tea like a shield. We need to talk. Of course. Come in. He didn't sit. Just stood there in the middle of the room like a politician about to make an announcement. There was a wild energy in his eyes, determination, and something else. Desperation, maybe. What's wrong? I asked. He inhaled deeply, puffed out his chest. It's about Raoul. About his future. I blinked. Raoul isn't born yet. Exactly, he said, as if that proved his point. Which is why we have to plan now. Cassidy and I were talking last night, and, well, Lola's on board too. We've come up with a solution that ensures Raoul has everything he needs. Lola? I asked slowly. What does she have to do with this? Drew waved the question away like it was a gnat. She's been helping us work out the logistics. She agrees this is the best move for everyone. I felt a chill then. A strange prickle down the back of my neck. What move? He looked me straight in the eyes. We want you to put your savings into a trust. For Raoul. Now. Before anything happens to it, or before you spend it on something frivolous. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity hit me like a slap. I beg your pardon? Drew didn't flinch. All of it. The entire account. Cass and I talked to a financial advisor. Setting up a trust now would be tax advantageous. Raoul would have access when he's 18. It's smart. It's secure. And honestly, Mom, it's the least you can do. My knees nearly buckled. The least I can do, I repeated, each word tasting like ash. He nodded, folding his arms. You don't need it. You're not going anywhere. You live modestly. And this way, you'd actually be helping someone. Your grandson. It hit me then. This wasn't a request. It was a demand. Does Cassidy know you came here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smirked. It was my idea. But yes, she supports it. Lola, too. We've been talking for weeks. This is what families do, Mom. They help each other. They plan for the future. They help each other. I set my mug down gently, afraid I'd throw it otherwise. You mean to tell me, I said slowly, that you and your sister discussed draining my account without my knowledge and are now standing in my home telling me, not asking, telling me to hand over everything I've saved so far? Drew didn't even blink. That money's just sitting there, Mom. You weren't going to do anything with it, weren't I? I asked. Is that what you think? He glanced around, as if my kitchen walls held the answers. What could you possibly need it for? It was like he couldn't fathom it. That I might have dreams. That I might have a future of my own. And then it clicked. Lola. She must have told him. About my hesitation. About my quiet withdrawal lately. Maybe she'd seen the travel books in my bag or overheard me talking about adult classes at the community center. Maybe she sensed that something was changing and panicked. Maybe she told him everything. You don't see me, do you? I said quietly. Not really. You see what I can give you. Not who I am. Drew's expression shifted for the first time, just slightly. Come on, Mom. Don't get emotional. It's not like we're cutting you out of your own money. It's still for family. It's still your legacy. Legacy. He said it like I was already dead. Something inside me snapped. You and Lola had no right, I said, my voice shaking with rage I hadn't felt in years. No right to make plans with my money behind my back. No right to treat me like a wallet with a pulse. It's not like that, he said defensively, stepping toward me. I raised my hand. It's exactly like that. He froze. Tell Lola I'll speak to her when I'm ready, I said coldly. And as for you, Drew, you have 10 seconds to leave my house. He scoffed. You're being ridiculous. 7 seconds. He stared at me like he was trying to calculate how serious I was. I didn't flinch. You'll regret this, he said, grabbing his coat. I already do. He slammed the door on his way out. And I stood there, in the quiet aftermath, my breath ragged and my hands trembling. Then I walked to the drawer and opened the folder that held my flight information, my passport, and the last 3 bank statements. It was time. Not just to leave the house. Not just to leave the city. But to leave them. I didn't get out of bed right away the next morning. I just lay there, eyes open, the ceiling staring back at me. My body was still, but inside, I felt like I'd been run over. Not by a car. By a truth so heavy it pinned me to the mattress. Yesterday, my son stood in my kitchen and asked, no, demanded that I give away my life savings. To him, it was logical. Reasonable, even. To him, I had no life outside my grandchildren, no use for money beyond groceries and pills. I was supposed to smile, maybe cry a little with joy at the opportunity to be useful again. But what he really meant was, you've served your purpose. Now hand over what's left. My bones ached as I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. I don't know if it was age or sorrow, but something about yesterday had settled into me like a fever. A slow, burning awareness. I'm not a mother to them. Not anymore. I'm a resource. A function. A line item in their budgets and childcare plans. The kettle was already whistling when I walked into the kitchen. I'd turned it on out of habit without realizing. I poured the water into a chipped floral mug and watched the steam rise like smoke from something that had quietly burned for years. As I sipped my tea, I glanced around the room and really saw it. The fridge covered in crayon drawings and school photos. The countertop cluttered with snack wrappers and juice boxes. Lola's tote bag, still slumped by the back door, forgotten. And the vase of roses, Robert's roses, drooping from neglect. My house had become an extension of theirs. A second nursery. A snack station. A backup plan. I wasn't living here. I was waiting here, waiting to be needed, waiting to be asked, waiting to be appreciated. And they never would. They wouldn't even notice the day I stopped waiting. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in, like the cold when you leave the window cracked on a winter night. You don't notice until your fingers are numb and your breath fogs the air. It came with every unreturned phone call. Every time Lola dropped off the kids without even checking if I had plans. Every time Drew called only to talk about himself. Never asking what I wanted, what I needed. Because to them, I didn't have a life of my own anymore. I'd become infrastructure. But I wasn't always this woman. Once, I was Ariana Clark, a teacher with fire in her chest and a voice that filled classrooms. I led poetry slams. I directed plays. I wore red lipstick and danced barefoot in the kitchen with Robert when the kids were asleep. And before that, before the wedding, the babies, the minivans, I had dreams. Big ones, wild ones, and friends. I walked down the hallway, barefoot on the creaky floorboards, and opened the linen closet. Behind a stack of unused guest towels was a shoebox I hadn't touched in years. It was labeled, in my own handwriting, Personal Canada. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, old photographs, notes scribbled on napkins, boarding passes from a trip I almost didn't return from. And at the very bottom, tied with a red ribbon letters. Dozens of them, all from one person. Alexa Morgan, my best friend in university, the other half of my soul. We met in English Lit 201 and bonded over a mutual hatred of Hemingway. We used to talk about opening a bookstore together, or traveling Europe in a van, or moving to Montreal and living off espresso and poetry. She moved to Canada after graduation. I stayed. Marriage, kids, life. We drifted. But she kept writing, even when I stopped responding. I found the last letter she sent. The envelope was yellowed, the ink faded slightly, but her handwriting was unmistakable, loopy, and confident. I read it slowly, devouring each word like water in a desert. Ariana, I wish I could be there with you. Losing someone like Robert must feel like losing a part of your own skin. But please, if you ever feel like you can't breathe, come to me. Come to Canada. You'll always have a place here. The spare room has your name on it. Come find yourself again. She left her phone number at the bottom. I stared at it like it was a map to another life. Then I closed my eyes and remembered. Alexa on a beach in British Columbia, barefoot and laughing. Alexa dancing with strangers at a poetry festival in Toronto. Alexa, who once told me, "Don't let motherhood be the only name they give you." I hadn't thought about that conversation in years, but now I couldn't forget it. I didn't call her that day. Not yet. I was still too raw, too afraid that if I spoke, I'd sob, that the words would come out as a scream. Instead, I picked up the phone and texted Lola. I need a break. A few weeks. Please don't bring the kids over. Her response came within seconds. Ugh, okay. I'll figure something out. Hope you're not sick. No, are you okay? No, do you want to talk? Just. Inconvenience acknowledged. Burden reassigned. Drew texted me that night. Have you reconsidered? No greeting. No context. Just the assumption that I'd see the light, change my mind, and hand over everything I had. I didn't reply. I went to the drawer, found a notepad, and started writing a list. At the top I wrote, things I am allowed to want, peace, freedom, mornings without obligation, a view of the water, laughter that isn't followed by cleanup, to be seen, not used. I stared at the list for a long time, then picked up my phone and dialed the number at the bottom of Alexa's letter. She answered on the second ring. Ariana. Her voice was older, but still electric. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's me. She didn't ask why I was calling. She just said, tell me when. And I said, next week. I barely slept the night before. Not because I was afraid. Not exactly. More because the gravity of what I was about to do pressed down on my chest like a weighted blanket. Heavy, unyielding, but not unwelcome. In a way, I felt something close to peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading the next day. I was preparing for it. I got up before dawn, dressed in simple slacks and a light sweater. Not one of my usual cozy cardigans that scream, Grandma. No. Today I dress like a woman with places to go, with purpose, with secrets. The bank opened at 9 o'clock, but I arrived at 8:45 and waited outside on the bench with my purse clutched tightly in my lap. The breeze was soft, the town still waking up. I watched young couples pass, coffee in hand, hurried, distracted. I wondered if they'd remember their mothers when they got older, if they'd call on birthdays, if they'd forget how many nights she stayed up with them just to keep the world from falling apart. At 9:01, I stepped inside. The place smelled of fresh ink and cold air conditioning. I'd been coming here for over 20 years. They'd seen me deposit birthday checks for Drew, withdraw crisp bills for Lola's school uniforms, transfer money after Robert died because the funeral home didn't take payment plans. I smiled at the young woman behind the counter. "Good morning, Mindy." She smiled back politely. "Mrs. Clark, how are you today?" "Oh, still standing," I said with a chuckle, masking the storm beneath my ribs. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please." "Of course." "What amount?" I slid the slip across the counter. Her eyes widened. "All of it." "Yes, all of it." "In cash." Mindy paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. "Are you sure?" "That's quite a large, I'm sure." "Just a moment," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll speak with Mr. Pritchard." She vanished behind a door, her heels tapping a rhythm of concern across the tiled floor. The lobby was quiet. A couple of retirees murmured by the brochures, and a man in a blazer typed furiously into his phone. No one looked at me twice. No one suspected the old woman with the silver hair was planning her escape. When Mr. Pritchard appeared, he greeted me like a long-lost cousin. "Mrs. Clark, I understand you'd like to withdraw your full balance." "That's correct." "May I ask why?" "It's just standard policy when it's this much." "Are you feeling safe at home?" "Safe." It was almost laughable. "Yes, perfectly safe," I said evenly. "I'm simply rearranging things. I've decided I prefer my own kind of security." He hesitated. "Is anyone asking you to do this? Are you under any kind of pressure from a family member, perhaps?" My smile didn't reach my eyes. "I assure you, Mr. Pritchard, no one in my family has any influence over me. Not anymore." He blinked, then nodded. "Very well. We'll need about 30 minutes." I waited in the corner chair by the window, pretending to read the pamphlet on reverse mortgages while my heart pounded like a warning drum. I thought about Drew, how he stood in this very room 2 months ago, asking for a wire transfer for a down payment he swore he'd return. He never did. I thought about Lola, sending me cute videos of Emily pirouetting in the living room with a caption that read, "Your little ballerina, can you watch her again tomorrow?" Always sweet. Always transactional. At 9:43, I walked out with my purse much heavier than it had been that morning. In it sat 37 years of restraint, sacrifice, and quiet deferral. My money, my story, my future. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the post office and filled out paperwork for a private P.O. box. When the clerk asked for ID, I provided it along with a second document I'd updated just weeks ago with my full name, R.A.J. Clark. A small revision. My first name, shortened. My maiden initial added. It looked like nothing, but it was everything. In the envelope marked medical records, I placed half the cash, then locked it in the post office box. It wasn't perfect security, but it was mine. And it meant I didn't have to go home tonight and keep that envelope under my pillow, dreaming about robbers or worse, my children accidentally discovering it. Back at the house, I moved quietly. I cleaned out my closet, packed only the essentials. One suitcase, small enough for a train overhead rack. One tote, filled with books, a sweater, and a worn photo of Robert smiling in front of a fireplace we built together. And then I sat down to write. To Lola and Drew, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not forever, but for now. I imagine this will come as a shock to you both. After all, I never said no, never complained, never asked for anything in return. I suppose you assumed I'd just keep going, keep giving until there was nothing left of me but ashes and groceries. But I have a secret. I'm still alive. I still have dreams. desires. A pulse that doesn't belong to either of you. You've made it clear, whether intentionally or not, that my role in your lives is one of service. Babysitter, checkbook, emotional sponge. But I was once more than that. I am more than that. I was a teacher, a poet, a woman who danced in bare feet with your father while Louis Armstrong sang us into laughter. A woman who stood up to school boards, who fought for students, who raised you both with a kind of love that demanded everything and received very little in return. So now I'm reclaiming her. I'm going to Canada, to stay with a friend, to breathe different air, to wake up in a room where no one needs anything from me. I haven't died, but I've been mourning for years. Now I choose to live. If you love me, let me go. If you don't understand, then you never really saw me. Please take care of each other. Take care of your children. And maybe one day, ask yourselves if you ever really asked who I was beyond the woman who gave you life. With love, but not with apology, Mom, I placed the letter in an envelope and set it gently on the mantel, right beside Robert's photograph. He was smiling in that photo, a little crooked, as always, like he knew something no one else did. Maybe he knew I'd finally leave. Maybe he'd been waiting for me to choose myself. When I turned off the lights and went to bed, I didn't feel scared. I felt like I'd finally come home to the one person I'd abandoned the longest, me. The train pulled out of the station just after sunrise. No one waved goodbye. The station was nearly empty. A janitor mopped quietly near the vending machines. A mother soothed a baby in a stroller. And me, an older woman in an oatmeal sweater, gripping a canvas tote and a heart full of quiet thunder. I watched the city shrink behind me through the smudged glass. The skyline that had defined my entire adult life receded like a memory I no longer needed to carry. Every passing mile felt like a thread snipping free. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I watched the trees blur, watched the fields unfold like pages in a forgotten book, and let myself feel something I hadn't in years. Hope. It was a long ride. Hours turned to day. My back ached. My legs cramped. But I didn't mind. I welcomed the discomfort. It meant I was moving. Forward. Away. Toward. When we crossed the border into Canada, I placed my hand on the window, as if touching a promise. The small town of Kenmare was tucked beside a lake that shimmered like glass beneath a soft gray sky. I'd only ever seen it in Alexa's postcards and emails, fishermen in rowboats, white cottages with painted shutters, festivals lit with paper lanterns in summer. Now it was real. The platform was quiet when I stepped off. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the air. Cool, clean, new. And then I saw her. Alexa. She hadn't changed much. A few more lines on her face, a streak of silver in her dark curls, but the same eyes. Warm, mischievous. Eyes that once dared me to skinny dip in Lake Ontario after midnight. She didn't wave. She ran. And I dropped my bag and let her wrap her arms around me. You're really here, she whispered. I am, I whispered back. She pulled back to look at me, hands on my shoulders like she needed to feel I was real. You look like someone who's finally breathing again. We didn't say much on the drive to her cottage. We didn't need to. We'd spent years talking. Now, we just were. Her home was small, white siding, blue shutters, a porch swing with cushions faded by sun. Inside, it smelled of cinnamon and cedar and something else. Freedom. You can stay as long as you need, Alexa said, pouring tea. This house has held a lot of healing over the years. You'll fit right in. I looked around the cozy kitchen, the mismatched mugs, the worn wooden table. It wasn't grand, but it was full of soul. We sat on the porch that evening, watching the lake darken as dusk fell. You know, she said, there was a time I thought you'd never leave that town. I thought the same, I admitted. But something cracked open. I just couldn't do it anymore. Alexa didn't ask for the details. She knew better than most that the breaking point rarely comes from one thing. It's an avalanche of little hurts, 1,000 swallowed disappointments, the slow erasure of self. You're here now, she said simply. That's what matters. The next morning, I woke to birdsong. Not the shrill cry of a phone notification. Not the clatter of children or the hum of the dishwasher. Just the sound of wings and wind and the soft creak of floorboards. Alexa made pancakes, just like she used to in college, slightly burnt, full of butter, unapologetic. We talked. We laughed. We sang along to Joni Mitchell while scrubbing the kitchen. We wore socks in the house and left the dishes for later. We walked barefoot to the edge of the lake and dipped our toes in, daring each other to go further. And for the first time in years, I wasn't someone's mother. I wasn't someone's errand. I wasn't someone's afterthought. I was Ariana. Funny, messy, curious, alive. At night, we curled up with books on the couch, wine in hand, our feet touching like teenagers at a sleepover. You're glowing, Alexa said on the third night. Am I? Like a woman who finally remembered who she was. I smiled. Not the polite kind I'd worn for years, but one that felt like it came from someplace real. I thought it would feel like running away, I said. But it doesn't. What does it feel like? Like coming home. It began with a brush. A simple, slender brush. Wooden handle. Soft bristles. Alexa handed it to me casually one Tuesday morning, as though she were offering me a spoon for soup. But I held it like it might bite. We were in her studio, the sacred chaos at the back of her cottage. It had once been a garage, she told me, but now it was a world of color and silence and soul. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, warming the worn wooden floors and the speckled surfaces where Alexa had painted stories for over 20 years. Try something, she said, setting down a fresh canvas in front of me. No pressure, no judgment. Just let your hands remember. I didn't know what my hands remembered, but I took the brush. I chose blue first. Cobalt, the color of deep water and sky just before it turns black. My fingers trembled a little. My heart beat loud enough to drown out the birdsong outside. And then, I made a line. One stroke, then another. A curve, a shape, a lake, a dock, a woman standing at the edge. She wasn't detailed, just a silhouette. But she was strong, alone, upright. My brush moved like it knew something I didn't. Time vanished. The world fell away. I didn't think about dinner, or the next text from Drew, or whether Lola had managed to find a babysitter for Wednesday. I just painted. And for the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't performing. I was being. When I finally set the brush down, Alexa came over and stood behind me quietly. She didn't say anything right away. Then, Ariana, that's you. My breath caught. I didn't know how to answer. The canvas felt too intimate to look at, too honest. I laughed a little nervously. It's rough. It's raw, she corrected. It's real. That night, I stared at the painting long after we turned off the studio lights. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had created something again. The next morning, I was the first one in the studio. I brewed coffee and turned on Nina Simone, just like Alexa had. I pulled out another canvas, and then another. Within days, I was painting every morning. I stopped wearing a watch. I lost track of time. I left my phone on silent in a drawer. That phone, it buzzed for hours some days. A persistent tap, tap, tap against the wood. At first, I checked. Lola, please call me. I don't understand what's going on. Drew, this isn't funny anymore. You can't just vanish. Then voicemails. Dozens. Lola's voice, tight with worry, then frustration. I had to miss work again today, Mom. If you're trying to prove a point, consider it proven. Please, just call. Drew's voice sharper. We're your children. You can't just shut us out. It's manipulative. I listened to one, then stopped. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't trying to make them worry. I was simply done being at their emotional mercy. And every time I dipped my brush into another color, every time a shape emerged from the blankness, it felt like I was gathering pieces of myself I hadn't realized I'd given away. Alexa let me take over half the studio. You've earned it, she said, smiling over her own work, a moody abstract piece called Rain that doesn't apologize. I painted a series of docks, empty chairs, women looking at the sky. One day, I painted my childhood bedroom, then Robert's old chair, then the inside of the pantry where I used to hide my tears on school nights after Lola screamed at me for not finding her ballet leotard fast enough. Each canvas felt like therapy I hadn't known I needed. And at night, Alexa and I sipped wine and cooked without recipes. We made roasted squash and listened to old soul records. We danced in the kitchen, barefoot and breathless. "You're glowing," she said one night, passing me a slice of pear with goat cheese. "I feel like someone poured sunlight into my chest," I whispered. She raised her glass. "To the woman they forgot was still alive." I clinked mine against hers and didn't look at my phone once. But the calls didn't stop. They increased. 10, 15, 20 missed calls a day. Texts that grew sharper, guiltier, more manipulative. "We're worried sick." "Please, Mom. You're being dramatic." "We're your family. Raul will be born in 2 months. Don't you care?" That one hurt. But I still didn't reply. Because I was beginning to understand something cruel, something vital. They didn't want me back. They wanted the version of me who gave, who bent, who showed up, who stayed silent. But that woman had painted herself out of the frame. She was learning new colors now. Kenmare was quiet that morning. Summer had finally settled over the little town like a soft shawl, warm breezes, distant laughter, the rhythmic slap of waves on the lake. It was the kind of morning that made you forget what you left behind. Until you remembered. Alexa and I had stopped at the town's only coffee shop after a long walk. She went inside to order pastries. Her new favorite indulgence was lemon poppy seed muffins that crumbled like soft gold in your hands. I stayed outside, drawn as always to the corkboard by the window, flyers for lost cats, dog walkers, and a watercolor class I'd been thinking about joining. That's when I saw it. At first, my brain didn't register. The headline was bold, stark, missing person. And there, centered just beneath it, was a photograph. My face. Me, standing in my garden from 2 summers ago, wearing a green scarf and a tired smile. Below the image, a paragraph. Age, last known whereabouts, contact information. Drew's number. It hit me like a slap. I stood frozen, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and nausea. The poster made me look like a runaway, like a confused old woman who wandered off in her slippers. A charity case. Not a woman who made a choice. Not a mother who had said no and meant it. I turned around and saw him. Drew. Across the street, leaning against a rental car, arms crossed, scanning faces as they passed. He looked gaunt, unshaven. Eyes sunken from too little sleep and too much certainty. I ducked into the alley behind the shop, heart pounding. The walls were cool brick, and the scent of garbage made my stomach turn, but I crouched anyway, hiding, trembling, furious. I stayed there for several minutes before I heard footsteps. Alexa. She knelt beside me, eyes wide. "You saw him." I nodded. "He's been asking around," she said. Went to the diner, the bookstore, even the pier. Told people his mother was missing. That she might be sick. That she wasn't in her right mind. I clenched my fists. "He's rewriting my story." She took my hand. "And we're not going to let him." We didn't go back into town for the rest of the day. Instead, we sat on the porch with iced tea, our silence heavy. I kept picturing the poster. My name, reduced to a headline. My face, made into a warning. The phone in my drawer buzzed for hours. Texts, calls, voicemails. I read them all. "Drew, Mom, this isn't funny anymore. We're worried. Just tell us where you are. Please." "Lola, Drew's losing it." He put up posters. I told him not to, but he wouldn't listen. "Drew again. What if something's happened to you? What if you're lying in a ditch and we're wasting time?" Each message was soaked in urgency, but none in understanding. None said, "I see you." None asked, "Why did you leave? What did we miss?" Until one night, 3 days after the posters went up. Alexa brought in the mail, humming as she sorted through envelopes. Then paused. She held out her phone, lips pursed. "Lola posted this," she said quietly. I took the phone. It was a screenshot from Facebook. Lola's profile photo, her kids in her lap, her smile bright and strained, hovered above a block of text. Lola Clark. I wasn't going to say anything. I thought she'd come back. I thought she just needed space. But now that Drew's turned this into a manhunt, I have to speak. My mother is not missing. She left. She left us. I don't know why. I don't know where. I've been angry, confused, ashamed. But I'm also starting to ask myself questions I should have asked a long time ago. Did we even see her? Did we ever stop to wonder if she was happy? Or did we just take? Mom, if you see this, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were drowning. I hope you can forgive us. I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. Not because it made everything okay, but because, for the first time, someone in my family had looked past their own panic and into the mirror. Alexa touched my shoulder. She's starting to get it. I nodded slowly. Tears slipped down my cheeks, not out of sadness, but something harder to define. Relief, maybe. Recognition. Do you think she means it? I whispered. I think she's beginning to see the woman who raised her wasn't just a mother. She was a person. Yes, Alexa said. And that person is finally painting again. Later that night, I sat alone in the studio, staring at a blank canvas. I dipped my brush into soft gold. Not because I had a plan, but because something was opening again. A crack of light. A chance. Maybe I wouldn't be invisible forever. Maybe I already wasn't out it arrived with the morning bread delivery. Wrapped in a plain manila envelope, tucked among a few catalogs and a handwritten flyer for a yard sale at the edge of town. Alexa, barefoot and holding a slice of toast, nearly tossed it onto the counter before something stopped her. There's no return address, she said softly. I turned from the window where the lake glistened like glass. She handed it to me like it might break. I knew that handwriting. Knew the careful curves, the way my name was written in soft loops, not like a stranger's name, but like something sacred and unfinished. Lola. I hadn't heard her voice in weeks, but suddenly I could hear her so clearly it made my chest ache. Mom, she used to whine when she was 12 every time I made broccoli. Do you want me to be unpopular? I held the envelope to my chest for a long time. The seal had been licked closed unevenly, her old habit. Too rushed, always in a hurry. Even her apologies were impulsive, half-finished. But this one had weight. I opened it slowly, afraid of what I might find inside: judgment, guilt, manipulation dressed in regret. Instead, I found a letter. A real letter. Not typed. Not cold. Ink smudged in one corner. Handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Raw. Nervous. Like she was afraid the paper might scream. And I read, Mom, if you're reading this, it means you haven't thrown it away. Thank you for that. I've written it in my head 1,000 times. None of the versions felt right. This one probably won't either. But I'm done waiting for the perfect words. I just want to tell you the truth. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry you left, because now I finally understand why you did. I'm sorry it took you leaving for me to see you. I used to think of you like furniture in our lives. Steady. There. Expected. Not once did I think of you as someone with your own dreams still humming under the surface. Not really. You were just Mom. The one who folded the clothes, watched the kids, took the call no matter the hour. The one who never said no. And I didn't thank you. Not really. I used your love like it was owed. Like it was part of your job description. I saw your exhaustion and said, but you're so good with the kids. I saw your loneliness and offered you a coloring book instead of company. I saw your time as a resource, not a gift. I saw you through the lens of what you could do for me, not who you were without me. And Drew, he was worse. He saw you as a bank account with a face. And I let him. When he said you should give your savings to his unborn child, I flinched, but I didn't stop him. I didn't protect you. I should have. I knew it was wrong, but I was too used to letting him lead. Too used to thinking you'd just bend again. You didn't. You broke free. And when you disappeared, I was furious. Not because I missed you, but because I couldn't use you anymore. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. That it took your absence to reveal my dependence. You didn't just disappear, Mom. You chose yourself. For the first time in decades, maybe for the first time ever. And now I can't stop thinking about all the years I didn't ask who you were. What you wanted. what you were sacrificing. I didn't see your joy. I didn't ask about your books, your dreams, your loneliness. You were my mother, but you were also you, a woman I didn't bother to meet. I want to know. If you ever want to speak, if you ever want to tell me who you are, what you've rediscovered, what you're painting, what you feel, I promise to listen. No expectations. No asking for favors. Just me listening to you. With regret, with love, and with hope. Lola, I didn't realize I was crying until I noticed the ink had smudged beneath my fingers. I folded the letter back carefully, reverently, like a sacred thing. Alexa sat across from me, silent, waiting. She sees it, I whispered. She sees you, she said. I let out a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding for years. Not the sigh of a tired mother. The exhale of a woman who had just been recognized. It wasn't a fix. It didn't erase the years. The Wednesday drop-offs. The guilt. The demands. The savings account they thought they could divvy up before I was even gone. But it was a start. And it was mine to hold. That day, I didn't go into the studio. I walked instead alone, down the path by the lake, through the pines, where the air smelled like rain and memory. I found a bench near the water and sat with the letter in my lap. And for the first time, I read it aloud. Every word. To the trees. To the ghosts of the woman I used to be. To the part of me that still doubted she had the right to walk away. I read it as a prayer. A reckoning. A bridge. When I finished, I pressed the paper to my chest. And I smiled. Because someone somewhere was learning how to love me properly. Even if it was too late for the past, it wasn't too late for the truth. The sky over Goderich was beginning to soften into gold. There's a particular kind of light just before sunset on the lake, when the water stops reflecting the world and starts holding it, like a secret. It was that hour now. The kind of hour where everything feels a little more honest, a little more tender. It was in that stillness that I took my usual path along the embankment. The stones were warm beneath my shoes. The wind tugged gently at the ends of my scarf. I hadn't brought my phone. I rarely did these days. I liked the quiet, the solitude. I liked that nobody knew where I was at any given moment, not because I was hiding, but because for once I didn't owe anyone my time. And then I saw him. Drew. He stood about 30 feet ahead, near the edge of the embankment, facing the water. His posture was still, hands deep in his jacket pockets. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't on the phone. He wasn't shouting into the wind like I half expected. He was just still. I froze behind the cover of tall grass, the reeds swaying like silent sentries. I could hear my heart. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing against my ribs. I hadn't seen him in person since the day he came to my kitchen, demanding my life savings like it was his birthright. That version of him had been loud, confident, unbothered by the ethics of asking his mother to erase herself for the sake of his unborn son. But this version, this man looked older. Not because of time, because of consequence. His shoulders sagged beneath a beige windbreaker I remembered buying for him 2 Christmases ago. He wore it now like a relic. His hair was longer than he usually kept it, and his face bore a kind of tiredness I'd never seen on him before. He wasn't the man who barked demands. He was the boy who used to cry when his hamster died, and the teenager who sulked when I forgot to buy his favorite cereal. He was the son I'd loved with every inch of myself, even when loving him meant shrinking until I didn't recognize my own outline. I could have stepped forward. I could have walked up and said, Drew. He would have turned, eyes wide, mouth parting in apology or denial or desperate relief. But I didn't move, because I wasn't her anymore. The mother who smoothed every wrinkle in his life. The woman who made excuses for his entitlement, who covered his debts, who rocked his baby to sleep while he dozed on the couch and called it helping. No, I had buried that woman the day I packed my suitcase and left behind the hollow echo of Mom that no longer meant me. Now, standing in the tall reeds, I watched him. He pulled something from his pocket, a small object he held for a long time in both hands. I squinted through the dusky light and realized it was a photo. Of me. Not recent. Not from one of the posters. It was older. One Robert had taken, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I was smiling faintly, wearing a coat and gloves, sitting at a picnic table in the park with a book in my hands. It was a photo no one else would think twice about. But he was staring at it like it held an answer he couldn't find. He wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't here to drag me home. He didn't know how to anymore. He wasn't here to accuse. He was here to reckon. But I wouldn't make it easy, because the guilt had to bloom on its own. And until it did, until he stood in that discomfort and named it for what it was, I would not absolve him. Not because I was cruel, because I finally understood that forgiveness should never come faster than understanding. I turned slowly and stepped off the path, retracing my steps. My feet moved with a calm resolve, each one more certain than the last. I didn't cry. Not this time. Not because I didn't feel, but because I finally felt everything. My rage, my sorrow, my rightness, and somewhere, deep beneath all of it, a quiet hope that maybe one day he'd come not as a son demanding love, but as a man ready to see the mother he never really knew. Until then, I would walk forward. Not toward him, toward me. I knew he'd seen me. There's something about a son's gaze, even when you pretend not to notice it, that you can still feel. It follows you like a shadow through the smallest corners of town. He didn't call my name. He didn't cross the street. But the next day, Alexa found the letter. It was wrapped in a soft blue envelope, my favorite color, though I doubt he remembered. The address was careful, precise, as if he was afraid I might throw it away if the handwriting looked desperate. The return address wasn't his house. It was a P.O. box. Maybe he wasn't ready to be found either. I waited until dusk to open it. I sat in the studio where the light glowed honey gold, where my most recent painting stood half finished, a silhouette of a woman on a cliff, her hair tangled in wind, watching the horizon without leaning toward it. I held the envelope in my lap for a long time before I read. And then I let his voice in. "Mom, I saw you." I wasn't sure at first. It was just a glimpse, your hair, your walk. The way you carry your bag over one shoulder like you always have. But it was you. I know it was. And you looked peaceful, not scared, not angry, just complete. It hit me harder than I thought it would. I didn't call out. I didn't follow. I just stood there and let you vanish again. This time, not because you were running, but because you didn't need to stay. And I understood, in that quiet moment, that you were never missing. You were leaving. On purpose. I keep thinking about the things I said before you left. The way I showed up in your kitchen and talked to you like a banker instead of a mother. I remember the moment I asked you to give your savings to my son. And the way you didn't argue. You just went still. Now I know what that stillness meant. It wasn't surrender. It was goodbye. I want to say I'm sorry, Mom, but even those words feel too small. I was your son. And I treated you like a structure, solid, silent, useful. I didn't ask how you were. I didn't wonder what you needed. I just assumed you'd always be there, because you always had been, until you weren't. Marie and I are struggling. That's not why I'm writing, but maybe it's part of why I understand now. She says I don't listen, that I expect too much without giving enough. I hated hearing that, but I needed to, because it made me realize I did the same to you. Maybe worse. You gave up so much. Your time, your energy, your savings. And I never asked what you wanted in return. Maybe I thought I was loving you, but I wasn't. I was consuming you. And you left because you were finally full of silence. I want to fix it. I want you to come home. Not because I need anything, but because I miss you. I miss your laugh, your calm, your presence. If you can find it in your heart to speak to me again, please write. Even just a line. A sign that you're not lost. That I haven't burned everything to ash. Love, always, drew by the time I finished reading. The light had faded completely. I sat in the dark with his letter in my lap, my fingers pressed against the signature like I could feel the boy I once held in my arms through the ink. I didn't cry, not in the way I had before. These tears were different. They weren't grief. They were recognition. Because in his pain, Drew had finally seen what I had longed for him to see, not my absence, but my humanity. And that mattered. Not enough to undo the years. Not enough to make me return. but enough to answer. I found a card tucked in the drawer of Alexa's writing desk. It had a painting of a winding path on the front, lined with birch trees. It reminded me of the road I walked each morning, the road I had chosen. I wrote slowly, each word a thread I pulled from someplace steady and honest. Dear Drew, yes, it was me. And yes, I saw you too. You don't need to be sorry forever. You only need to mean it. And I believe you do. I'm proud of you for writing that letter. I know how hard it must have been. But I need you to understand something, and I need you to hear it without trying to fix it. I am not coming back. Not because I don't love you. Not because I've stopped being your mother. Because I'm finally being myself. I have a life here now. One I built from the ground up, with shaky hands and a heart that wasn't sure it deserved peace. But it does. And so do you. I hope you learn how to love without taking, to give without erasing yourself, to listen without expecting. I hope you become the man your son needs. But more than that, I hope you become the man your mother needed, too. If you want to know me now, you're welcome to write. But you must come without demands. Only then can we begin again. With all my love, Mom, I walked the letter to the post office that night, the moon high and gentle above me. As I slid it into the slot, I felt no fear, only a quiet finality, and something close to joy. Not because I had ended the story, because I had finally written the ending myself. The banker's name was Marta. She was kind, probably in her mid-40s, with quiet eyes and hands that didn't rush. When she first led me into the private room at the back of the branch, she assumed, like most do, that I was there to correct a billing issue or transfer funds to a child or grandchild. She didn't expect this. No one ever does. I'd like to donate the majority of my savings, I said, to a charity. She blinked. May I ask, which one? I slid the brochure across the table. She read the title aloud, softly. Safe Years Alliance, supporting elderly survivors of psychological abuse. Her face changed, just slightly. The polite professionalism softened, replaced by something closer to recognition. I saw it. She knew someone. Maybe she was someone. I can help you arrange that, she said after a moment, her voice steadier now. How much are we talking about? Most of it, I said. All but enough for a modest monthly allowance. I've calculated what I need. This is everything else. There was a silence that filled the whole room, a kind of reverence. I didn't explain why. I didn't need to. But inside, my mind flicked through every image like slides in an old projector. Me, counting coins to buy Drew's school supplies while skipping lunch. Me, holding Lola's newborn while she scrolled on her phone, saying, "You don't mind, right?" Me, standing in my kitchen, while my son asked me to give everything I had to his unborn child like it was a reasonable request. Like I had no other dreams. Like I wasn't someone before I was theirs. Marta worked quietly beside me, helping me set up the transfer. I signed page after page. With each pen stroke, I felt a strange sensation, like I was digging up the roots of something long buried. Grief. Yes, but not only grief. There was something like joy, a quiet, humming joy that came from giving on my own terms. I wasn't emptying myself out for people who believed it was their right. I was choosing to give to strangers who needed a second chance at the freedom I had finally claimed. The organization, Safe Years Alliance, was small but fiercely run. They worked with seniors fleeing toxic family situations, controlling children, neglectful caregivers, manipulative relatives. They provided relocation assistance, emotional support, temporary shelter, and legal referrals. Most of all, they gave people permission. Permission to walk away, to choose themselves. I didn't want my name on a plaque. I didn't want gratitude. I just wanted someone else to have what I almost didn't. That night, I sat at the lake's edge in my favorite sweater, watching the clouds stretch like worn lace across the horizon. Alexa joined me with 2 glasses of wine. Do you feel lighter? She asked. I looked out at the water and smiled. No, I said. I feel real. We clinked glasses. Freedom tastes better than I imagined, I added. Does it? She teased. I turned toward her. It tastes like not apologizing. In the days that followed, I pared my life down. I closed the joint bank account I had once opened with Lola, back when she promised it would just be for emergencies. I canceled the life insurance policy where Drew had named himself the sole beneficiary to make things easier later. I cleaned out the last drawer of just in case clothes for the kids, the ones I kept in case they dropped off the grandchildren again without warning. There was nothing left of them in this space now. Only me, my paints, my brushes, my books, a calendar with no scribbles in anyone else's handwriting. I wasn't bitter. Bitterness is when you wait for someone to fix what they broke. I wasn't waiting anymore. I had moved on from the life I gave them, and I was building the life I kept for myself. I still answered Lola's letters. Sometimes. When I wanted to. Drew wrote too, less often. His letters were shorter, humbled, more careful. He never asked again if I'd come back. Maybe he'd finally understood. I had not left to punish them. I had left to find myself. And I had found her. A woman who no longer apologized for her absence. A woman who, instead of being a legacy for her children, chose to be a lantern for strangers. Let them remember me however they like. But someone somewhere will open a letter from Safe Years Alliance and read, "Your transition support has been funded by an anonymous donor. You are not alone." And that, to me, is the only kind of immortality worth having. The phone rang at 6:42 p.m. I was in the studio, kneeling on the floor, painting in silence. I had just finished blending 2 shades of indigo into the sky of a mountain scene when the soft buzz broke the stillness. It rang once, twice. By the third ring, I knew. I reached slowly for the drawer, the one I used to avoid, and pulled the phone out like it was a memory I'd buried under scarves and brushstrokes. The screen glowed. Drew Clark. I hadn't spoken to my son in almost 5 months. I hadn't heard his voice since I left behind the town, the life, the name that once meant only mother. My finger hovered. I had every reason not to answer. All the cold Wednesday mornings. The bank account emptied. The baby that was suddenly more deserving of my future than I was. But still, I answered. "Hello." The silence on the other end was so thick it felt alive. Then came a sound I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not manipulation. A breath. And then Mom. It was soft. Strained. As if the word itself carried a weight he hadn't noticed before. "I didn't think you'd answer." I leaned against the wall. The sun was setting through the skylight, catching the flecks of gold in the painting. I could see my reflection faintly in the glass of the window. Not the woman who left, but the woman who had arrived. "I almost didn't," I said. He didn't rush to fill the space. "Good. That was new." "I've been meaning to call for a while," he said. "But I didn't know if I had the right." "You always had the number," I said quietly. "You just never used it when it mattered." Another pause. A wounded pause. I deserved that. I didn't confirm or deny. I waited. "I've been thinking a lot," he said. "About what you wrote. About who you were before us. About how we never asked." His voice cracked a little. "I thought you'd always be there. That was the deal, right? You're the mom. You're supposed to pick up the pieces." I closed my eyes. "Even when you're the one who broke?" I asked gently. He let out a breath. "Exactly." There was a long stretch of quiet between us, but it didn't feel like the old kind. It wasn't punishment. It was space. Space to feel. To become. He continued, voice rough. "I was wrong. About all of it. I thought your leaving was selfish. But now I think it might have been the most honest thing you ever did. It took everything not to cry. But these were not tears of sadness. They were the ache of being seen after a lifetime in the background. Mom," he said softly, "I want to know who you are. Not just who you were to me. If you'll let me." I looked around the studio. At the canvas. At the stacks of books I'd collected. At the card from Lola pinned to my corkboard. At the painting Alexa and I finished together. My life in pieces and colors and hours no one else owned. "I'm not coming back," I said, my voice clear and certain. "I know. I don't belong in that house anymore. In that role. You outgrew it," he whispered. And I never saw it happen. I let out a slow breath. "You saw it," I corrected gently. "You just didn't like what it meant." He didn't argue. Another change. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not just for what I asked. for how I asked, for assuming you'd have no future beyond us. And now, I asked. I see you, he said, as someone who deserved more than she got. That was the moment, not the apology, the recognition. I sat on the edge of the windowsill and smiled through tears that now came freely, like rain long overdue. I live differently now, I told him. I paint. I walk. I write. I sleep in. I buy flowers for no reason. I drink tea while it's still hot. I read books I never made time for. I have friends who call just to ask about me, not because they need something. That sounds beautiful, he said. It is. Do you miss us? I paused. I miss the idea of us, I said carefully. The version where I was seen, where I was asked about, where I was loved as a whole person. That family never really existed. Silence. Then I want to build something better. You can, I said, but you'll have to let go of the version of me who existed only to serve you. I'm trying, he whispered. I smiled again. Good. Then you're on the right path. We talked for another hour. Not about the past. About books. About the color blue. About the way silence isn't loneliness if it's chosen. About Roel learning to crawl. About how he tells stories now, just like his dad used to. When we finally said goodbye, I didn't feel regret. I felt real. Like every step I had taken into this new life had led me not away from my family, but toward a deeper version of it. One that included me. That night, I looked in the mirror and touched my own cheek gently. I'm proud of you, I whispered. And I meant it. Not for surviving. For becoming. Because in the end, I hadn't run away from anything. I had run toward someone. Toward the woman who painted. Who read. Who laughed from her belly. Who no longer lived in the margins of her children's lives, but in the bright center of her own. And for the first time, she was finally living.